All right. Now, I'll start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on in this area, the Yagra and the Turrbal people, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. And because we are going out onto Zoom, we are zooming out to the lands of many different First Nations people right across the country. And I'd like to pay my respects to the elders of the places that you are zooming in from. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Sovereignty was never ceded. So it's my absolute delight to welcome Kris Olsson and Patti Miller here. We have two very, very big brains in the room with us. A bunch of people in the audience already were here for a workshop with Patti this morning about the intricacies of truth-telling. And Kristina Olsson, who is a truth teller herself, has been running a series of workshops on memoir with us. And so we really are in the presence of two incredible memoir writers and memoir teachers. So it's really great to be in their company today. So Kris Olsson, of course, the memoir which brought her here, I think, is Boy Lost, which won everything when it was released, basically too many to list, but also is now being turned into a theatre show with Queensland Theatre Company. And is that true? With Queensland Theatre Company? Apparently, yes. I did see something on Facebook about it, so I know that this has been in the pipeline. So really interesting to have your work then turned into theatre as well. But Kris is also the author of fiction as well, and her latest novel is Shell. So with Kristina Olsson today, we have the wonderful Patti Miller, and I'm going to just read Patti's bio for you. Patti Miller was raised on Wiradjuri land in central western New South Wales and now lives in Sydney. She's the author of Writing Your Life, The Last One Who Remembers, Child, Whatever the Gods Do, the memoir book, the award-winning The Mind of a Thief, Ransacking Paris, Writing True Stories, and The Joy of High Places. And of course, now we're here to do the Brisbane launch of True Friends. So please, everyone, put your hands together for Kristina Olsson and Patti Miller.
I also like, of course, to acknowledge the younger and younger people of this area, and the young people especially, who are really coming up strongly now, telling their own stories that have been published and sitting out there on the shelves of books. And yes, sovereignty wasn't exceeded. Thank you, Chrissy, for that lovely intro. I want to just add a quick thank you to Madonna Duffy, who of course published August back in the day, 10 years ago, nearly. Gosh, what's that called? Anniversary coming up next year. That's right, anniversary edition of Boy Lost coming up next year. Very exciting too. I'm very lucky to be sitting with my friend Patti Miller, memoirist extraordinary and teacher extraordinary, of course. This new book, True Friends, which of course is going to resonate with absolutely everybody, because of course we all have true friends. We all have true friends. Or friends you think are true.
Kris, can you hold it a bit closer? Just the people on Zoom are having trouble hearing.
Is that better?
I think that is.
Yeah, not too echoey?
No, that's okay.
Right. Yeah, so of course, as soon as you see a book with a title like that, you think I've got to read it because it's already part of me. But this book is a very beautiful, beautifully told, lyrical story about a friendship, of course, that does fall apart. Something else we all, I think just about all of us experience sometime in our lives, even though we don't like to think of it at the time. But before we get into the nitty-gritty, of which there is much, I'm going to ask Patti to do a short reading for us, just to give you an idea of how lovely this book is.
Okay, thanks, Chrissy, for that introduction, both Chrissy's and Pat, for that. Okay, this is a piece which is fairly early on, and then maybe it's just heading the reader off in a certain direction. As I recall my friendships, it feels like a kaleidoscope. Memories falling and shifting to make new patterns as I hold it up to the light. The story of Gina has exotic, brightly coloured fragments, scarlet, gold, and blue, which makes it seem that she has been the most important of my friends. And certainly, she has mattered a great deal. There was, I thought, a rare communion of thought and feeling between us. but I've had that communion with other friends at different times. I know I'm obsessively circling back over the friendship with her, twisting and retwisting the kaleidoscope, but that's because it ended. A flow of warmth and connection was suddenly withheld, and I don't know why. I don't remember any unforgivable acts, any violent arguments, although there was one rift about halfway through our 15-year friendship, a ragged, stretching split that opened up between us. Perhaps that serrated the edges of the kaleidoscope pieces or created a flaw in the glass. I had to continue to let them fall to see where the flaw was. In the beginning, I was trying to understand what had happened to the broken friendship. I was hurt and bewilderment is a strong engine. But since I've begun writing, the hurt has faded. Now there is a pure desire to try to recreate what was, to see how we know anyone and how anyone knows us, how others live in our minds at the cellular level of memory, to see how all the knowledge we have of each other and of existence, all we have ever had, is a selective electrochemical story in our brains about the things we have seen, smelled, touched, tasted, heard, right back to the first story ever written.
Very true. All of you. This is a book that doesn't just talk about memoir. Patti and I both teach, I think, in our memoir classes that, telling a story is one thing, but there's another level to all of our stories, and it's the context in which they happen. It's the universal sides of the tiny things that happen to us are reflected and echoed in the people on that side. And Patti goes into all those things and sort of the science of it, the science of friendship, the science of feeling, about memory. And we get a beautiful thread through also of the Gilbert story, which at first I thought, how is this going to fit? But Patti makes it fit very well and reflect back at us. So some stage of the talk about that. But let's go back to the beginning. I was looking at some research the other day out of the university, I think the University of Texas in the US, that's reported that you typically spends 50 hours with someone before you consider them a casual friend, 90 hours before you call them a friend, 200 before you feel really close. It wasn't quite like this with Gina, was it?
No, and from talking to people a lot, especially since the book's come out, I think, that instant recognition is actually very common. It's one of the things, one bloke who owned a bookshop in Sydney said to me that as soon as he arrived at a choir, just joined a choir, and he knew instantly which other bloke he was going to be friends with. Oh yeah, that's that kind of, there's an instant recognition of a maybe of a kind of kindred spirit, I guess. Yeah. And you then spend a little while checking out. I always notice that kind of checking out conversations that you do for a while, just to see that you are, in fact, yes, coming from the same place, those sorts of things. But I think there is something in us that does recognize somebody else who is going to mean something to us. That doesn't mean there's going to be a happily ever after or anything like that. But there's maybe it's an energy that we're noticing.
Emanation.
Yeah, something about them, that kind of attracts you to them, and it's not really to do with their looks. It's to do with a kind of attention, I think. I think I'm always drawn to people who are paying attention to the world. Yes, yeah.
So, can you take us back to the first days and even months, perhaps?
Well, yes. Yes, I met because she had, I still lived in the mountains then, and she'd rung me up and wanted to meet with me because she wanted to write a play from one of my books. And so we met in a cafe in Balmain. She actually had my number because she'd been the director of a play my son had been in. So she sort of had seen the book and wanted to write a play about it. So So our first meeting was in this cafe. She was there first, and she had a copy of my book on the table, and that always helps. and so our very first conversation was about the creative process. So right from the beginning, from the very first moment, the very first contact was about how do you make something, and that was key and is key to both of our lives. Is how do you make something? How does something come from nothing? You know, and then that's always the creative process. Something doesn't exist, or all sorts of little things exist, but not in the form that you would want them to exist in. So from that moment, our friendship was about creativity, and that's a really strong kind of bond, I think, that when you're working together with somebody on something, or you're both working on something and you understand each other's process.
And did you have things in common in terms of the creative process? Did you both approach a manuscript or a play script in the same sort of way?
I think so. I mean, I think there's certain elements of the creative process that are always the same, whether you're talking about painting or acting or writing a play script or writing a sort of creative non-fiction, because you're always putting pieces together, if you like. You know, I mean, I used to have conversations with one of my brothers who's a painter. I've got a couple of brothers who are painters actually, but and you know, talking with him about the creative process, it's almost, you know, we are talking the same language. So I think, you know, her process was very much about putting together unlike pieces and seeing what did connect them. And I think that's the same with me. You know, when I think about you know, the science of the neuroscience of memory and the Epic of Gilgamesh, you would not think they went together, you know. And I, of course, as always, at first, I thought I'm biting off more than I can chew, but that's what I do. I always bite off more than I can
Isn't
chew.
that what we do as writers? Though?
Yeah.
And then sort of nibble away and see how far.
Yes.
We're going to talk about Gilgamesh, but let's introduce it now in terms of how you've stumbled across on that, in terms of it being one of the lines in the story, or the main background.
Yes. Well, it was actually because I was thinking about when I started taking notes for this, and really the notes just came out of my bewilderment about why the friendship had ended. So I was bewildered. I started taking notes, and then I realized that I couldn't think of any other kind of cultural production about friendship breakups. You know, I thought, where are the songs, and where's the poetry, where are the novels, you know, where are the films and books about friendship breakups? I mean, mostly they're about romance or marriage breakups. You know, there's like Eleanor Frank is my beautiful friend, a brilliant friend. But it's kind of about the complexity of friendship, but not really about a breakup, except that, you know, she disappears. So I guess it's a kind of breakup. So then I thought of, what about the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a friendship between two men, that they don't break up in the sense of having an argument, but one of them is killed by the gods. So it's about what do you do when you lose a friend. So I went back and had another read of it and realized that it wasn't just about the intricacies and complexities of friendship. This is like nearly 5,000 years ago, and they were completely up to date in what goes on between friends. It's quite extraordinary. But also, in the end, it's about how we need to make a story out of it. And I just thought that was extraordinary, that the first story, written story, that is, ever found, is actually about the importance of telling stories about what happens to us.
And that's what we do.
That's what we need to do. I think it was who was it said, Joan Didion said something like we can handle anything if it's in a story, something like that. I'm misquoting, but that's the gist of it.
Yeah, absolutely. You say, just going back to the friendship and how it built and how it faded away, I think you say if you were asked about the friendship then, you'd say Gina read you better than any of your other friends, that she read you in a way you wanted to be read. And then you go on to say, I would have thought that a friend can interpret the secret story written in hieroglyphs inside you and get it right. And that's how you felt about Gina from the get-go. Yeah.
Yes, I think that is the kind of the powerful thing in any true friendship is that you see each other, you read each other, you feel that that person sees you in the way that you would like to be seen, and you don't have to be anything other than what you are. You don't have to be more impressive or anything like that. You just feel at ease in that. But apparently, and I don't know this is the place to mention the neuroscience, but I'm always going to go back to that anyway. Is that apparently it's true in terms of what's happening in your brain, that there's research that has been done in the United States very recently, within the last couple of years, which shows that when you are talking with a friend about anything that you're both interested in, might be your family, it might be psychology, it could be the state of the world, but your brains light up in the same way, and much more so than when you're talking about the same topic with other people. So when you're friends with someone, you become two kind of little electrochemical lamps for each other, kind of lighting each other up, saying, you are here, we are both here, and the world as we perceive it, and we agree that the world is the way we say it is.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. But I really want to get into this a little bit in terms of one of the other things you say is that you recognised yourself in Gina as well as the other way around. And when you were drawn to the best of yourself in her. But just before, when you talked about marriages and other relationships and the way they fall apart, did that also mean that you were able to see her worst, or she was able to see yours and negotiate around that?
I don't think so. I think somebody was talking to me the other day about the stages of friendship, and that they were the same as the stages of romance or marriage, and in that there was a gloss where you saw only the best, and then there was a kind of shifting period where maybe they annoyed you and you started seeing their ordinariness, and then if things were to keep going, you adjusted to the humanness of the other person, and you were able to live with the various aspects of themselves. Or if you had, during that shifting stage, started concentrating on what was wrong about them, then you would probably, the marriage would end or whatever. And so it's the same with friendship, that if it goes over time, you make those kinds of adjustments. So I think, there are some friendships though that seem to only really want to exist on that intense level. And when that intense level is over, the friendship is over.
So do you think that's something about creative people?
Yeah, it's a difficult one, I think. I think it is. I remember, Catherine Mansfield wrote about it, and she was saying, that someone else, she was talking about someone else in the previous set, and said they only wanted to live at that intense level.
Yeah.
And I thought, that's not me. I'm happy with the plains as well.
What about sitting around just with a Vegemite sandwich? And,
yes. Yeah. Yes, or just doing a sort of ordinary chat about shoes or something like that. It doesn't have to always be that intense kind of level, but I think those intense friendships and romances are maybe are inherently maybe more fragile.
And was Gina's like that?
More fragile.
Just all tense, all intense.
It was pretty much, yes.
Yeah. But there were those things when you were in Paris together, because Patti teaches memoir in Paris. You still do that, I think.
I do. I've got a leaflet for it, in fact.
Oh, excellent. There you go. Anyone who wants to write memoir in Paris. And then Gina began to come over and join you every year, just to be in Paris at the same time as you. So that's a fairly immersive kind of friendship, isn't it? When you're going to the other side of the world to be with each other.
Well, it was more about that she loved Paris as well. Yes.
Yeah, but and also actually I meant to get back to that point that there was that more whimsical side too, because you talk about that lovely scene when you're looking in secondhand clothes shops together, and she's looking at the hangers?
There were sculptures made of wire coat hangers,
Yeah.
but they were sculptures of monsters.
Yeah, that's
You
right.
know, and I thought, yes, the wire coat hangers do become monsters in the cupboard.
Yes, absolutely. As you found.
Yeah,
Yeah. How long did this friendship last?
It was 15 years from when we first met until I got a text which said, "Don't contact me."
Right. Okay.
Mm.
And how many times had you been in Paris together?
Well, I don't know because I mean, I wasn't counting.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't really know now. I can't tell how many times, but maybe it was only 3 or 4 times actually.
Yeah. Right.
Mm.
Okay. Yeah. But when you were in Sydney, you saw each other a lot.
Yes,
As well
yes,
as,
yes.
almost living in
Yes.
each other's pockets in
Yeah,
Paris.
yes, and she became friends with my partner as well.
Yeah.
So you know, we 3 were friends, and we each had other friends as well. It wasn't exclusive kind of friendship, but it was an intense friendship.
Was it one of the best kinds of friendships, do you think? I mean, I was just wondering, you know, whether it's too easy then, if it was or it felt like that, to ignore the undercurrents of unease, if you like.
Yes, I mean, I do like those kinds of friendships that are about the creative process and about ideas. I mean, I do enjoy that a great deal, but I kind of realize that there are different kinds of friendships and they're all valuable. And I think everyone probably has different kinds of friendships. You know, I realized there were a few friends, you know, where we talked a lot about family and about our kids and about our parents.
But there's those early motherhood years.
Yes, and also about our own childhoods and our own parents and about psychology and personal growth and all those sorts of things. But there are other friends where I wouldn't have had the least idea about those sorts of things, and certainly not about their boyfriends or romantic relationships or sex life or anything like that. We talked about abstract ideas. We talked about literature. You know, there's a couple of friends that were very dear to me, and I realised I had never mentioned a boyfriend of any shape or size. You know, I only found out about one in Paris because the whole marriage, in fact, which I didn't know about, because she started writing. And she gave me her manuscript. And then suddenly this husband of 12 years appeared. And I didn't even know it existed.
That was all in the background.
Yeah, so I think there's different and I value all those kinds of friendships, you know, those kinds of friendships. I mean, Montaigne, who I know we both love, he said that only that really intense kind of friendship deserved the name of friendship. But while I love him, I don't agree with everything he says. I think, you know, there's a variety in friendship.
Did you find yourself, do you think, altering your outer self to match Gina's? I mean, there's that thing, you know, I mean, I find myself at times altering my approach to some things, depending on who I'm speaking to, depending on what the friendship is based in, I suppose.
I mean, I think we do that all the time with all of our friends and all of our relationships. I mean, there's some people that you wouldn't, well, I wouldn't talk about abstract ideas with, because I know their eyes would just kind of blur.
Water.
Yes. And you know, and there's probably some people that I wouldn't talk about frocks and shoes with, because they think I was terribly shallow. So, you know, I think we all do alter ourselves according to the situation that we're in. And I can remember, and I think that's a kind of attendance to the other person as well, you know. And I remember my mother saying about her father that he altered his accent according to whomever he was speaking to. And I was thinking, I do that as well. You know, I can go up or down, and it's not conscious. It's just trying to not make the other person feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Well, especially if you've had a particular kind of childhood where you dropped your G's or spoken a very, you know, a vernacular that was very whatever, working class.
Broad,
broad.
Yeah.
That as we grow older, we subtly change.
Yeah, so I do think we are different selves with different friends, and that's why it might be a little bit awkward if they happen to all come together
at the same time.
Yes, and suddenly it's a bit weird, you know, maybe for our 40th or 60th or something like that, and then there's all these friends, and we don't really quite know how to behave.
That's right.
Because we're a slightly different person with each of them.
I love that idea, because it doesn't make it sound like, you know, they're all like cut glass, you know, different facets of ourselves and our lives. But just on that, were you ever in a big group at a party with Gina and a lot of other different friends that you found interesting or uncomfortable? Or
no, I mean, I'm not much of a party person, to be honest. But there were a few gatherings, but we didn't really mix very much with each other's friends. We each had our own kind of circle of friends, and I don't remember feeling that. I think probably most of my friends probably work in the creative world in some way or another, so there's always would be that in common. So I don't think there was any. I don't remember any sense of feeling awkward or different.
Yeah. Do you think the friendship with her changed you in any fundamental way?
I don't know. I mean, that's tricky to say. I think that I think it was interesting in that to find a friend and make a good friend later in life as well. Because of living in the country, when you live in the country, your friends normally disperse all over the place, you know, especially when you've gone to boarding school for a couple of years, as I had to. Your friends came from everywhere anyway. So you don't have many friends from that time of your life, you know, and you generally come elsewhere. Whereas I know plenty of people who've grown up in the city and they're still in the same city and they have friends from way back then. So it was interesting to find a friend later in my life, and to realize that you actually can make that connection with people at any time of your life. If you're open to it, you can make that open connection with anyone at any time.
Yeah. Do you still feel like that?
That I can do that? Yes. I'm even though that friendship ended, I'm still willing to take that risk. I realize, you know, yeah. I do like that openness of connection with others. I think it's part of what we all long for is a communion with others, a oneness with others. But at the same time, there is also the need to be separate. I think those are two kind of opposing forces, really. We want to be one with someone, but we want to be separate as well. So I think friendship can usually provide that for you. And I think maybe in other kinds of relationships like romances and marriages, there can be a kind of subsuming of one in the other.
Yeah.
You know, and for me, it's always been important to maintain a kind of separateness.
In who you are.
Yes.
Even though it does make us a bit skinless, doesn't it?
Yes.
First, at least. Yeah.
Yes. Well, certainly writing books is the best way to become skinless.
Yes, absolutely. Yes.
I was saying that today through the group, you know, that like reading your work out is like, you know, undressing in public. And I said, but having a book come out is actually like walking around without skin.
Yeah, absolutely. And with all those darts and pins. But and it's true, because I had this little quote written down. I think it's from you, Pat, about friends like books who molded you, polished you, cut you, reflected you, and changed you. I think that does come from the book.
Yes, and I think, you know, for me, the person that probably kind of shaped and changed me was when I was very young, when I was 16, when I met Jane at boarding school. Yeah. And that was the first person that I'd met who kind of valued the creative, the poetic, the wonderful, the beautiful. You know, yes. I'd come from the bush, you know, yes. And I was talking, when I first met her, you know, you exchange stories about your family, and I talked about us lying on the scraggy old lawn, looking at the stars.
Yeah, that was a beautiful scene.
And she said, "Oh, your family is amazing." And I was like, startled, because I thought it was only because it was so hot in the house and we had no TV to keep us in there. And the only thing to do was to drag a blanket out and lie on the lawn and look at the stars. But then I suddenly realised that she saw it as poetic, you know, that we were looking at the stars and talking about satellites, and she saw it as something full of wonder and magic, you know, and I thought that's what she values, you know, and that became the currency of our friendship, was what was wonderful, beautiful, poetic. And I think that kind of shaped the whole rest of my life.
Yeah, I was going to say that must have absolutely that did get beneath the skin, didn't it?
Yes, yes, it did. And that had already come from the reading I did, because I was reading these 19th century women writers, Ellen Montgomery and Ethel Turner, and their books really were all about that, really, about the girl who, wanted the kind of poetic life. So meeting someone who valued that kind of, it shaped how I would live my life.
And brought you to Gina, basically.
Well, one of the people, yes.
Yes, among others, but
yes.
Certainly she had all those qualities
yes.
as well. And there was that real closeness, that real intimacy in the friendship, wasn't there? And to be able to be fully yourself, and to be seen and understood, I suppose. But that reciprocity that you both gave each other, which is unique and what we look for, I guess, a give and take, if you like, of everything. And that went on for the whole time.
Yes,
didn't it?
Yes,
didn't it?
yes. And we're working together on we're not working together on projects, but talking about our individual projects and being able to discuss them.
Yeah.
And I think every writer wants that, like somebody who gets what they're trying to do and can maybe extend what they're trying to do. And like writing, as we both well know, is a very solitary process.
Yes.
You do it by yourself. So it's very valuable to have somebody that can listen to what you're doing and give you notes and understand what it is that you're trying to do, and also just can cheer you up when it feels like you've made a mess.
Yeah. Well, let's get on to the scary bit, really, I suppose, which is when you realise things weren't turning out the way they had been for so long. It's after you come back from Paris, when you're back in Sydney, she's living her little one bedder, and you're just down the road. So were there any signs?
Well, mainly it was just the usual ones of either texts not being answered or that she was too busy. She had other things to do. I mean, that happens, so you accept it, But when it's sort of for 6 months and they're only 5 minutes away, you start thinking maybe there's something wrong, that you've done something wrong, you've said something, I was always brought up to examine my conscience. So, which is not a bad thing. I don't think it's a bad thing. To try and work out what it was that I'd done, and so I couldn't get a kind of a meet up to do that, and then I hadn't heard from her for 6 months, and suddenly got a text, and she was in hospital, and so I did go and see her, very often when she was in hospital. But afterwards, she told me not to contact her. So that kind of, and that was what was puzzling, and I don't and never have attributed any blame anywhere. It's simply bewilderment. And that's what the book came out of, trying to understand that. But I also wanted it to be, once I started writing it, I wanted it to be also about how we know each other. How does anyone know each other? Yeah. Because it's just our observations of each other, which come from the kind of person we are, because different people will observe different things about us. And so each person will construct a different self. We exist in hundreds of other people's heads, which I find quite fascinating. Yeah. And they're all different constructions according to what their background and personalities that lead them to observe about you. And so I wanted to kind of include that. So I thought I'm going to look right back to the first friend that I made when I was 5 years old, which I had very little choice about because she was the only girl in my class. And it was a tiny little school, I think maybe 17 when I first started there. Yeah. And a number of them were brothers and sisters and a few cousins and things like that. So she was the only girl. So it was about kind of exploring how we connect to other people, what we do know about other people, and how we construct each other in our heads, and we relate to that picture that we keep maintaining in our heads about other people. And often it can bear no relationship to other people's version.
Yeah. Yeah. And where does memory come into this, Patti? Because you do a deep dive into this in the book as well.
Yes. Well, to me, it's clearly what we remember about somebody, what we take away from a first meeting, and two people meeting the same person. One of them will be kind of noticing, the fabulous outfit they've got on, and someone else will be noticing how stressed their face is, according to the kind of person they are. So it's first of all, what we observe, and then what we remember about what we observe. Yes. And then over time, putting those different observations and then memories together to form a kind of video of somebody else in our heads, But it's a very variable thing in that each time we take a memory out, it gets rewritten. And something that's actually happening while we're retelling it can be edited into the original memory and we won't even notice.
It's very untrustworthy.
It's very untrustworthy, and it's also very bad at, apparently, I said this today to the group, that it's very bad at source monitoring. Yeah. It could be from a dream, it could be from a TV show. It could have happened to our cousin.
Yeah, and certain things influence the way we remember something.
Yes, but it's all we've got, and unless we are the Queen or somebody terribly famous whose life's been documented from birth onwards. There's really not that much.
But that's subjective too, and people will write with an inflection.
Well, they can interpret those things, yes, but at least there's some kind of record of things. But I didn't want to write a record of a friendship or of friendships. Yeah. I wanted to write the memory. So the book to me is very much, maybe as much about memory as about friendship, because I didn't check with anybody their memory of it, because I thought what I'm doing is trying to put on the page the weird construction that I've made in my head. The only things I checked were things of public record. Yeah. What year, or when did the moratorium march happen in Sydney in 1972, that kind of thing. Yeah. But other than that, and I was proved wrong even while writing the book. I got, there was a friend that from university that we'd had a bit of a breakup, and I was sure, I knew it happened in Katoomba when I lived in the Blue Mountains. And then we met each other. She was in a writing class and we, it was fantastic, great friends again. And she emailed me photographs of the both of us sitting on my back step. As we do. Three years after. In my memory, it's still in Katoomba, but I know now that detailed memory is absolutely not true, because there was the visual evidence.
It's very unreliable.
So for me, the book is about the pictures we have in our heads.
Yeah, and so you interrogated some of that of your own, like your memories of Paris and your memories of the early days of the friendship.
Yeah, and even the meeting with my son, I go into quite a bit of detail about a play by Carol Churchill, which was about. It was called Mad Forest, and it was about the downfall of Ceausescu, and that she directed and all that sort of thing. But then you learn in another page or two that wasn't true, that I actually was another play altogether, So I'm kind of saying from the very beginning, memory is a confabulator.
Absolutely. It's one of the first things I think we teach in these classes is that never ever think you're getting it right if you just sit down and try and remember what happened in your childhood. It'll be always completely different. All your siblings will always disagree with you.
They will. But it also is all we've got, unless, we've had a publicly recorded life. So,
but even so, that's subjective as well. I mean, newspapers, if that's a public record, I wouldn't trust them as far as you could throw them, really. So how did you deal with that in the process of the writing? I'm interested in the process of getting this book together, knowing how long it takes for you to do it. How did you deal with it daily, or did you with the memory thing?
I think for me, it came up very early on because I had written the whole thing about Mad Forest, and then did some database research and found out that it wasn't. And I thought, I'm actually not going to change that. I decided right then and there, like 3 or 4 pages in, that it was going to be about the picture in my head, the memories, that everyone carries around with them. Yeah. So I decided to foreground it, that it would be going right through the book, and I know it's a big risky thing. I'm fascinated by science, and particularly I like neuroscience, any kind of science, will do me.
Yeah.
But I do particularly like neuroscience. But when I left school, I mean, I was actually good at science at school as well, but I kind of faced the fact that I would be one of those appalling people who made up the data to fit the great idea. So, and I thought I'm more interested in the great idea than in the data, you see.
Right. Yeah.
So I thought, no, I shouldn't follow that path. But I did, and I do always, I wanted to kind of, I did do that research, research various papers and read other people's research rather, and wove that through it. But I didn't do it in a kind of calculated way. Just whenever it came up into my head about the kind of weirdness of this process, I would allow it, my thinking about it. And I think some of it was cut. I think my editor realised that I was rabbiting on a bit too much maybe about that. And it was the same with the Gilgamesh stuff, that it was kind of came up very early on, and I wanted to keep weaving it through as it came up. And I did kind of realise that even with that, with the Epic of Gilgamesh, that it actually reflected the memory process, in that all these bits of this story have been found all over the Middle East. The most were found in what was Nineveh in northern Iraq.
Yeah.
There were like 12,000 tablets found, not all of them, obviously, the epic, but, it would depend on how carefully and clearly the original, I don't know what you call them, people who press hieroglyphs into clay, writers of some sort, and the quality of the clay and how it had been stored. And then, did it get broken and bits of it were mixed with other bits? And then...
And were they cranky that day, or were they happy that day?
Yes, yeah. And then, it'd been found, a few thousand years later, refound in the mid-19th century, the people reading it and interpreting it. So it was very much like the process of memory. Maybe it hasn't been laid down properly in the first place. Maybe bits from here and bits from there have got mixed together, and maybe we're not interpreting it in the way that it was originally meant to be. So those, it turned out, as it always does in the creative process, the things that you thought were really unlike actually echo each other.
Yeah, very much so. I think that one of the big lessons of writing memoirs is the unreliability of memory and of truth, because there's no such thing really as truth once you start to barrel into it. You've got yours and I've got mine, and your brothers have got theirs, and they're all going to hold tight to that version of truth. Yes.
Now, for each of us, our own version is right.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. But I don't think it means that truth doesn't exist. I just think it means there's a variety of them. And for me as a writer, the important thing is to try and get my truth on the page. But I have no illusions about it being the truth.
Yeah.
It is just trying to be accurate about my own experience of being in the world, because that's what interests me. And that's what interests me about memoir altogether, actually, is what is it like for people to be here? I really want to know what it's like.
In their skins.
To be other people looking out at the world. What is it like for you to be here? Because nobody knows, even the people who love you have no idea what it's like to be you. And it's only through art that we can actually express what it's like for us to be here. And that's what fascinates me.
And especially the ones who love you, I think. They're always going to come up with a good version of you.
Yes. Or or a stereotype version.
Oh yeah, absolutely. What about the difference between men and women, I suppose, in friendships? I was looking at something the other day. I think it was the British writer Tim Lott is wonderful on this sort of stuff, and he says women have an unspoken pact with a friend, and that's always about being supportive of each other, and that they really invest a lot in each other, whereas men in their friendships accept what he calls a little grit. They can tell each other fuck off, and then the next day they'll have a beer together. It's just a very different thing. What do you reckon about that?
Well, yes, I mean, really, we can't know what actually goes on between men.
Well, indeed,
because they will change their behaviour if we are there. And I think it's the same with women. I mean, the way that women behave when there's no men there at all is very different. I've found, it's much looser, much louder,
Yes.
a lot more fun
Yes.
going on. But I just, going back to Gilgamesh and Enkidu, I mean, they started with a fight, so I think there is an element of maybe competition in those kinds of friendships, between men. But
Chess company stuff.
yes, and I think also I've noticed that in my friendships with men, there is I think it's nearly always an intellectual connection rather than an emotional connection. I mean, I like them and can love them, but the conversation pretty much stays on the ideas and politics and all that kind of stuff, and not about your kind of inner feelings or
you mean the friendships between men and women.
Between men and women, yes.
Absolutely.
I did have some of those in the book, but my editor and publisher persuaded me to take them out.
Okay.
They didn't fit.
Okay. Yeah. So what were you trying to say about that?
I think I was saying something like that, but I read that it was because I was arguing that they were similar in kind. But I kind of faced the fact that they weren't. Like my first reader and then editor and publisher all said, no, it feels different. It's not part of the book. I finally accepted that and realized they were right and took that out. Yeah. But it could be another book between men, friendships between men and women.
I think it's one of those things. We're going to do questions. Yeah. Yes, God, we're going to stop now. And there's so many more things to talk about, but I'm hoping that there are some questions out there that you'd like to ask Patti. Don't be afraid.
Yes.
With your friendship with Gina, and it was a dramatic end by the sound of it was fine. Would it not have been that you just drifted apart? Maybe there's a repeat.
Yes. The question is, it seemed like a dramatic end, and could it have been that we just drifted apart? And perhaps that was already happening because, yes, there had been that period of time where we hadn't seen each other. But equally, it could have just been, as it is with some friends, you don't see them for a while and then you remake a connection with them. But the text made it fairly final, so that it was a kind of fairly dramatic ending, but often it's more just a slow drifting apart. But then there are friends like my friend Jane, whom I met when I was 16, and I don't see her very often because she lives in Florida, and she's still one of my dearest friends. So we have that heart connection. I think there's always, and when I was writing the books, one of the things I realized that I often think there's that intellectual and creative connection, but when I looked at it really closely, I realized there was a heart connection, that we cared about each other. So that was kind of the thing underlying it.
Any other questions?
Yeah.
Do you think Gina's read the book and what do you think?
Well, no, I don't know about that because I'm not in contact. So I don't know whether she would have read it or what she might have thought about it, is because I'm not in contact with her.
Oh, I have questions. Sorry. Without giving the ending of the book away, I was just curious, were you really quite hurt by that text message?
Very, yes.
Did it take you a while to overcome that?
Yes, it did. And I mean, I've talked to a lot of people like while I was writing the book and also afterwards. And so many people have told me, like people have come up to me and said, they broke up with a friend 30 years ago and it still hurts. But I realized, it did hurt me because you feel that you must be unacceptable and you don't know why. But the interesting thing for me was that as soon as I started writing about it, or within a week anyway, the hurt had disappeared. Now I was just trying to make something out of it. I was trying to create something on the page. So for me, the creative process, I guess in a sense, instead of the thing that's happened controlling you, you're controlling it because you're trying to make something out of it.
So the book gave you closure.
I guess you could say that. Or it gave me a sense of freedom. I could see clearly, that I had been hurt, but it was almost like the hurt was like a museum exhibit. It was behind glass now, and it wouldn't hurt me, but I could still see that it had been a painful thing to happen. But I think, you know, it's probably true for anything that you go through that is painful or difficult. Writing about it actually helps give you some detachment from it.
One last question from me. Oh.
Just speaking to that point about the contrast between male friendships with regret and female friendships with the support agreement, do you think that female friends need to learn how to argue more?
Gee, that's a really good question, actually. Yeah. Yes. This person has asked, do I think with male friendships having grit and female friendships being about supportive, do women need to learn how to argue more, you know, with each other? Yes, I mean, with each other. I think that's a really good question, and it's maybe it is an issue, you know, because I think very often, and what I've learned observing myself, but also talking to lots of people about this issue, that very often it's because something is not said that it stews away until it becomes a huge problem and there's an argument or a nastiness, and then it's over, or there's just a pulling away. Whereas maybe if it could be talked about, it could have been sorted out. But I think also, particularly in the Anglo culture, which is kind of still dominant in Australia, we are very strongly conditioned not to tell the truth. You know, it is the kind of cornerstone of the English culture, is to be polite, to be nice, to not say what you really think about anything. You know, and that's fine. It keeps the kind of, you know, the social kind of wheels turning. But it also means when things are painful or difficult or irritating or annoying, they tend to get pressed down, and we stew about them. You know, and so I think that's a really, you know, useful point, that maybe we do need to learn how to argue better.
I was just checking if there are any questions from Zoom, but I think we're done.
We all thank Patti Miller.
Thank you, Ms. Olsson, and to both Jessie and Pat.
Get a chance to have your book signed. I know a lot of people have booked in advance, but if you haven't, if you want to have a look. And we're going to move Patti inside, and we're going to have a signing just near the front door. So I might get Patti through first, but you're not stuck.
Feel like
Hey Patti, we might get you through so that
yeah, so And the other thing is that I've got this friend Steve, who's living in Midland. So what I like people to do is